I just scarfed down a cup of coffee for this, so let's see if we can do this in one take, huh? Here's the deal. It is very hard to tell a Mexican abuelita, I don't know if that's the word for it, but like she's a great grandma. Hard to tell her no. You know what I'm saying? They're like, do you want pancakes? And I'm like, no. Do you want eggs? I'm like, no, I just want coffee, and then I gotta go work. And then they're like, why don't you go sit down with the, but here we are. So we're on the sixth strategy of war. So what's really cool about this is the strategy is segment your forces, the controlled chaos strategy. So I have the privilege of being here in Mexico right now and actually being able to observe this law. And I'm going to tie it into what I'm seeing at the martial arts gym that I'm training at, as well as the gym that I'm going to, Ricardo, who's hosting me, he owns this gym here in Mexico. So again, segment your forces, the controlled chaos strategy. So the challenge with leadership in any organization is micromanagement, as in one head of the hydra, one head of the serpent snake, due to their lack of capacity for true embodiment of what it means to be a leader, feels the need to micromanage in every single category, in every single subsection. And what that does is it really puts a thorn in the side of everyone who's trying to operate with their, intelligence at the forefront of their operational capacity. Meaning, I've had it in the past where they not only need to dictate the what, but they feel the need to dictate the how, which is a huge mistake when it comes to leadership. Meaning, if I can get the same task done, what does it matter the means that I achieve that end? So long as it's morally, correct. What does it matter if I choose to do it my way, or if I find an easier way than your limited, view on how a single task can be accomplished? It's one of the biggest problems within leadership. It's that horrific micromanagement. It's let me micromanage you to the point where it becomes condescending. I mean, I've literally been in there where the ask is to book, an accommodation, and they'll literally be standing behind me to make sure that I'm doing it the way that they want me, to do it here and here. And I'm just like, why the hell am I even doing this? If you're, just either give me full autonomy, full operational authority, so long as it's in the confines of what you want me to do and you let me run with it, or do it yourself and get the hell away from me. It's actually from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. He discusses the exact same thing. He's like, you want to tell people who are within your organization, within your company, with your mission, what you want them to do, but you need to let go of the how they achieve that goal. But you want to give them that parameter. You know what I'm saying? And that's how you're going to see your greatest ingenuity. You're going to see your people shine, right? Because they'll get very creative. They'll get very innovative. If you give them the freedom, the resources, and the freedom to show you. And actually, it's from not that same book, but from the Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. One of the tenets is give people a noble character, a noble name, virtue to live up to. And the example that he uses is there's a pilot mechanic that works on the airplane of, I want to say it was President Roosevelt. And he did something that was a huge mechanical error, could result in him dying. And he went back up to that mechanic and he allowed him to save face. And he said this, he said, because I know you will never make that mistake again, I'm personally handpicking you to operate on my aircraft, next. And by giving him that reputation of, I know you're not going to make that same mistake, how hard do you think that person worked in terms of their attention to detail the next time around? By giving him that noble character of, I know you're the man or the woman of such character and caliber to not make that kind of mistake again, versus the boss that would just throw you over the coals, feed you, humiliate you, not even privately, but publicly, and not allow you to save face in front of all your peers. And how hard do you think that person will work? It's the same thing as a coach to an athlete. The athlete, if given trust by the coach, will work harder to not let them down. Do you know what I'm saying? People, when they're given the gift of belief, will work harder, to prove you right. That's the sentiment that I'm trying to share. So I can see this from an organizational standpoint. I can see this from a business standpoint. When I go to the martial arts gym, they run different operations at the same time. Like while I'm doing the jiu-jitsu class, before they're doing a Muay Thai class with a different instructor, and then they're doing a CrossFit class, and then they're doing a dancing class simultaneously. And one owner-operator cannot manage all of those things at the same time. You need this teacher, this coach, this person at reception, and giving them full autonomy, like letting them know what you want to get done, how you want to greet your customers, your clients, the expectation. You set the expectation, you set the standard, but you give them full operational warfare autonomy. Got it? So that's the scene that I want to set for this number 6, the 6th strategy of war by Robert Greene. The book is actually what's holding up this camera. And if you notice, we're going out our sweet beard. I'm going to the barber on Tuesday, and so it'll get cleaned up. So don't worry about this, but this is probably the longest that I've ever grown out my facial hair for. So we're becoming a true wizard on this noble quest. Here we go. Segment your forces, the controlled chaos strategy. Speed and adaptability from a flexible organization. Break your forces into independent groups that can operate and make decisions on their own. And so I have 3 examples. The first one is the video game. So I played this game called World of Warcraft, and actually when I reflected on it, I had to have played that game for like 15 years, because I first started when vanilla came out, so that was before Burning Crusade. It was just the original World of Warcraft. And my oldest brother would have me like mine for him. He's like, I just need you to fly around here, and when you see this colored dot on this mini map, go there and then mine the ore, and then I would like collect, fucking titanium ores for it. It was crazy, it was ridiculous. But in that game, as I became, one of the best players in the world at it, there was a kind of matchmaking game that you could play called Rated Battlegrounds, right? And it was actually the most recent thing that I did before, quitting the game again. And it's like 10 versus 10, okay? And you queue into this big zone, this big map, and you would need to literally implore this law, segment your forces. And the funny thing is, I got the title strategist from, the most recent title for that game. So I have a lot of authority to talk about this law. But what you would do is you would send carefully curated teams to each of these bases, okay? And what would give you a greater degree of power is literally that. Flexible, break your forces into independent groups that can operate and make decisions on their own. So what you would do is essentially send an arena team, so a team of 3 or 4 to each of these bases, and then let them play and operate within, not being micromanaged. As in, if I was a healer, I would go with a couple DPS to this place, right? So we have the person who's sort of calling the shots, saying, you go here, you go here, you go here. But then we're independently operating once we're at that location. It's the same thing in warfare that he discusses. Whether it was a Napoleonic war, whatever, he would have letters and officers written to, letters written to their officers of where to go, of what to do. But when it came down to it, when you were in the trenches, they had full control, full autonomy of the decision making, even if it went completely against to the command given. And there's actually a beautiful quote that I highlighted. I didn't transcribe it, but it said, it was in response to like a German warfare like lore of why Germans in the future would operate independently when they were trained to follow and adhere to strict protocol, strict orders, strict commands, right? And the guy's excuse was to refuse that of an officer. We're taught and conditioned is to refuse the command of a king. And then the reply from the prince says, His Majesty chose you to be officers because he believed that you would know when not to follow his commands and to go against them, for the sake of victory. And then that was the mindset, the judgment henceforth for all of the officers. As in, when you're in the trenches, you have, if someone 3,000 miles away is getting reports, they're not there. They have no idea what's going on there except from the letters and whatever from the messengers that they're getting, weeks, if not months, delayed and later. But in the trenches, in the moment, you have to have these leaders who can make decisions on their own, who can adapt, who can say, this will actually lead to our demise should we follow it. So it's actually surrounding yourself with people who you can completely trust. and who you can give that complete autonomy of decision making while still being in the confines, while still aligning with your general mission and your values and principles for an organization. So that was the first example, was those battlegrounds that I would do in the game. It's the same thing. And then we'll talk about later of what gives you an advantage over other people, but I just want to set the stage right now. The next one is the garden. So the name of Ricardo, who's hosting me right now, his gym that I'm helping him a lot with the work and stuff when I can, that he's building, he calls it El Jardín, which is the garden in Spanish. And he does the same thing, and he said, something that I learned is you have to delegate. You have to delegate, you have to delegate. Meaning, there are a lot of times where, another person will walk in. The way he runs his gym is like, it's an open gym, so people who kind of know what they're doing, they can go and work on their own. But then he offers right now, while he's building his customer base, you can get free personal training. And so people, who don't know what they're doing, they come and then they get trained by him or his brother. However, I'm here and I've been training people for over a decade. And so when he finds himself busy, or when he finds himself, otherwise taken with another, customer, another prospective, member to sign up for the gym, without needing direction, without needing, an ask, will go and train the person, because I'm trying to, it's almost like I'm doing volunteering at a hostel essentially, or like, a workaway, where I'm earning my keep by, the accommodation that he's giving me, by all that I'm giving back in terms of my work and my time to help him, to water his garden, so to speak. But I'm seeing it in real time, the delegation. Do you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, he knows that I know what I'm doing regarding fitness, training, and that he can put me in a position where I have complete control and autonomy of the workout, of the training, of the discussion, of taking a person who's brand new, of meeting them where they are, of making sure to give them workouts that are safe for them, to have those conversations about diet, etc. By having people like me who understand his mission, his values, are in alignment with that. If it's someone that he's trying to get, to close, if they're a brand new one, leading them on that discussion for, signing up for the gym, or committing, putting a financial investment, something that forces accountability. I'm a perfect cog in that wheel while I'm here. And he knows that, and so that allows him to have mobility and flexibility and be able to do other work while he knows I can do this no problem until he's free, and then he can take his person back and then finish the workout, close them on the sale, etc. Does that make sense? That's the second example. Third one, I put the skeleton of a school or any business. So I'm coming from working in a school district, and from an operational standpoint, it's the exact same thing across any business. So I put break your forces into independent groups, or I didn't put, this is from the book, that can operate and make decisions on their own. So if you think about an organization, it runs just as a school district does, where it's broken down into those little inter-departments. As in, you walk into the office, the first thing you see is human resources. Then there's the superintendent's office. Then you walk down the hall, and there's the marketing team. And then you keep walking, and then there's the administrative assistants, executive assistants. Then then around that is all of the administrators. And then there's the fiscal, actually that's over there, the fiscal service department. Okay, then over there's the IT department. Then over there's the assistant superintendent, and that's, and then over there's the behind the scene guys who work in the warehouse. You can apply that to literally any organization. They run the exact same. And so again, to bring it home, break your forces into independent groups that can operate and make decisions on their own. So the way that school districts structure that is you have a leader that oversees each of those departments. My former assistant superintendent of business and administrative services, they would oversee human resources. They would oversee benefits. They would oversee, I believe, fiscal, obviously. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, and then benefits. They would oversee all of that that was their corner. The assistant superintendent would oversee, the other one would oversee educational services, which would oversee all of the administrators, which would oversee all of the administrative assistants. Does that make sense? It's by having if you want the whole thing, and actually this applies to any company, is you have your board of directors, board of trustees, and then they give out the goals. That's their job, is governance. Then you have the superintendent, his job is execution. His job is executing the goals set forth by the governing board, okay? And then who he relies on are his assistant, his assistant, so the title is executive assistant to the superintendent, board of education, as well as the assistant superintendents, Who the assistant superintendents rely on are their assistants, which I was a former one of, and their directors and their administrators. And who those administrators and directors rely on are their administrative assistants or office assistants, etc. Do you see that skeleton, that work organization, that chain of command? It's the exact same thing in a war. I don't know all the different titles, but you have your emperor, your leader, your general, a quartermaster, your officers, your lieutenants, your etc., etc., etc. And it's just chain of command. But in each, next branch, it's the ones who have, he talks about speed and mobility and adaptability is from flexibility. It's from giving someone an order or a command, but giving them autonomy, freedom to change and adapt to changing circumstances. Does that make sense? Okay. I put this from the book, give them a mission to accomplish, let them run. And so the other day I was having a discussion with Ricardo, giving him a bit of specific praise and recognition for how he's running his gym, his organization, his company, his brand, El Jardín. And I told him something that I saw of, I didn't know the name of the guy at the time, it escaped me, but it was Richard Branson. I won't say his last name, it's Richard Branson, the owner, founder, I believe, of Virgin Airlines. And he said something in an interview where this is a billionaire, being interviewed, and the interviewer, versus interviewee, the interviewer asked him, he said, how do you do it? How do you build, a competing airline company when you're brand new, going against these titans, right? What is your style of leadership? He said, you need to hire the best people. You need to hire the best people for the job. You need to give them the resources that they need. And then you need to give them the vision, tell them what you want them to do, build, create, whatever, impact, and get the hell out of their way. Okay? Brilliant. That aligns with Dale Carnegie, that aligns with Stephen Covey from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that aligns with this strategy of war, with how Napoleon would operate in his warfare. It aligns with all of that. Why? You give people freedom to accomplish the how by just letting them know the what, but also giving them the resources that they need. When I worked in the school district last, it's monopoly money that schools get funded with and played with, where they get these grants and they get these awards and they get all this. It's made up money that made up on a computer that gets sent into accounts receivable, and that gets diluted down to different accounts under each administrator. And so each person will have their own bank account, their own how they can spend money on. And they could be on whatever. It could be on anything that's in alignment with the budgeting that they did in the prior year for the projections of the new year. And so if they had new curriculum, if they needed these new textbooks, if they needed these new gadgets for their DVMA class, whatever, they would have that budget and they would have that wiggle room, and then they would be able to place those orders in the following year. They would be given the resources that they need to accomplish their goals. And so working in a previous ROP school, it would give them the resources to stay competitive for students who are going through these regional occupational programs and then going into the workforce right after graduating from the program, and then going straight into the workforce and working within those industry competitive, for example, if you're going into medical assisting, you would want to use the equipment as if you were going to be hired right out of school as a medical assistant. Make sense? So it all comes from what? The Richard Branson quote, giving them the resources, giving them what they need, telling them what they want, as in the governing board would tell, okay, these are our goals, these are our missions, these are our, they had key things that I forgot what the name of them were, but goals that we're trying to accomplish. We want to be more economically conscious. We want to have better, fiscal responsibility this year, whatever bullshit that they, use. That they want to be in alignment with. And then your job as the administrator or as the director is to communicate that desire to your teachers, who would then align with it within their purchasing. And their purchasing would reflect alignment with those ideologies. So that comes from the Richard Branson quote of give them the resources, tell them what you want, and then get out of their way. Okay. Never tell people how to do things. Tell them what you want them to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. So when I said that earlier, I was actually plagiarizing my future notes from the book. And I put, there's a quote that I aligned with a lot, and I learned it from, I don't remember if it was one of the founders of Facebook, or the founder of Facebook. I don't remember, but the quote was, I think it was actually from Steve Jobs. I think it was Steve Jobs or Bill Gates. And they said, if I'm given the choice of hiring a lazy person or a smart person, I will choose the lazy person every time because they will find an easier way to do something. And I remember I've been that way since the beginning of my working career, whether that was me as a student, as an academic, or in the workforce. I would be given a task, and then there would be something on loop in my head that once it was wasting my time trying to do it, a way that I felt, was too long. I would say my default software would be the software script that would be read in my head that I would, say out loud or to myself. I would say there has to be an easier way to do this. There has to be, and so maybe it's from laziness. I don't know, but I would always have that as my default. And then, sure enough, what would I do? I would find an easier way to do it. The challenge with that, right, is when you get someone like me who's very intelligent, very resourceful, very fluid and mobile, to a poor leader who is insecure, who feels the need to micromanage, who only knows how to do something one way, and wants to make sure that it's done correctly, thinking that there's only one way to do something or to accomplish something. And so that's when horns would be met like this. And that's when I would get the utmost animosity from these narcissistic cows, these people who just were very, very poor leaders, who didn't understand, who didn't have security, who didn't, give me that gift of belief, of trust, who they not only felt the need to control the what, they felt the need to control the how. Those are horrific leaders, but they exist in every organization. And I have the unfortunate history and experience of being subjected, privy to a plethora of them. So they betrayed that quote, which is never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. Hiring a lazy person quote in my experience. So in multiple school districts, I've had that to where I would literally what led up to my last big fallout from the last organization school that I worked at is it was actually malevolent intention to get me fired. But not only would they tell me what to do and tell me how to do it, but then they would reprimand me and yell at me for doing what they told me to do. And then use that, and they would report me for literally just following their instruction. It was like when they can take it to the utmost extremes of reflecting their stupidity. And it's very unfortunate that these people are the ones who are in positions of authority and giving directions to good-hearted, well-intentioned people. But anyone who's worked in an office with someone who just doesn't have integrity or professional development, you see them at their limited capacity, and you probably have been subject to their projection, their lack of emotional control and stoicism, and their just, adult tantrums. It's unfortunate, but that is the reality of working in the rat life. Next. I put it takes security. So I'm going to butcher the idea, but I learned it from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's like the last habit of the best kind of leader. And it's called interdependence. And I think it touches on this exact strategy and law, which is segment your forces, the controlled chaos strategy, by breaking your forces into independent groups that can operate and make decisions on their own. One of the last tenets of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People was not only just giving everybody a spoon, but having the security within yourself to let go the control of those operations. I'm pretty certain that was the idea that came from that book, and so that's why I wrote it down. When you do this, it takes security to let go. When you say, never tell people how to do things, tell them what to do, and they will surprise you with their ingenuity. Why? Because you're affording them trust. You're giving them, the room to fill your life with uncertainty, And so that is the importance of. I remember I watched the show Suits prior to getting hired at my last job, working in a school district. And the way that I was able to counter, a lack of experience with my, former title was by performing within my hours and setting that precedent of work ethic and output. As in, I would get in before I was scheduled to come in, and I would leave later than other people who came in later to the office than me would leave. So they were on a staggered schedule. So the ones who would come in at 8 o'clock and leave at 5 or whatever, and I would come in scheduled for 7:30 to leave at 4:30. I would come in at 7 and leave after 5. And so people would see me come in, or I would be at my desk, and the people who would be scheduled after me would see me when they came in, and then they would see me when they went out. And I made that as a precedent, for my leaders, for my leadership, as in to be taken seriously. And it's actually a quote from Kobe Bryant that your work, the best way to gain confidence is through your work, through your output. And so when other people see you performing, there's no question that you're the man for the job. And that's the idea from the show Suits. He was like, people thought that I worked 100-hour weeks. And when you have that kind of reputation, nobody doubts your capacity to get the job done. And then you have freedom of autonomy. They won't care how you get done because they know you're the kind of man who executes, who does get the job done, who always meets the deadlines, etc. Versus the one who, they can't trust because they don't have that resume, that portfolio, that archive of, performing, of, achieving the deadline, of, getting the task done, and, above and beyond expectation. So, but that takes security and trust from your superiors that the best way to build that, trust is by performing, is by showing them that, you're trustworthy, right? If you have a consistent habit of execution, they can see that, then that trust is going to be, more freely given. What I've learned in martial arts gyms is that it's a weird sentiment, and I don't like it because I remember when I played the video game World of Warcraft and I didn't have the made-up title, there would be people who wouldn't give me the time of day. A lot of people in martial arts gym, they're the same thing. There are some people who they will literally treat you with the same respect. That respect is given, but a lot of the people within martial arts, within the made-up title in that space, they believe in the idea that respect is something that needs to be earned, which is, in my opinion, complete garbage. But the way that I was raised is that you respect it, you treat everyone as you would like to be treated, you afford everyone the gift of respect. And then if somebody betrays that and proves themselves to be not worthy of your respect, then you don't feed them anymore, you don't give them energy anymore. But the idea that you need to perform, it's that idea of conditional love that I don't align with, that I need to perform in order to earn your respect. I think it's garbage. But I'm noticing that within martial arts. You can see that sometimes within working in an organization, a school district, or any organization. But it comes from a sense of security, self-love, self-respect, the embodiment of unconditional love that you impart on yourself and on others. But like I said, it takes security to be in that place because most people, they're not secure with themselves. Most people don't love themselves, let alone like themselves. And then what do we do as a result? We take it personally when then they don't like or love us or trust us because they don't even trust themselves. They don't even trust the person that they see when they look in the mirror, right? And so oftentimes you'll get treated in a form of a projection of the way other people view themselves. So if somebody doesn't like themselves, you're not going to get that same love and adoration and affection within yourself. But it has nothing to do with you, And so development and maturity is being able to step away from that. We actually learned this in the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, The 4 Agreements. Don't take things personally, because 100% of the time has nothing to do with you. You are just a mirroring back their development, their personality, their character, their integrity or lack thereof, etc. Okay. This is achieving what Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People refer to as interdependence. I believe. You can check with me on that, but I'm pretty sure. And it's to let go of control. So, but the beauty about it is what you lose, there's actually a quote from the book, what you lose in perceived control, through the micromanagement, you gain in mobility. For example, when I go and I take on the personal training of a client for Ricardo, for his brother Roberto, they have the freedom to do other operations simultaneously. Do you know what I'm saying? So and then that gives them more power and more control over the growth, and expeditiousness of their business, of their vision, of building the whole enterprise. You know what I'm saying? But that takes security and it takes trust within yourself, within your team. Okay. But it takes the security to what? To let go. Okay. Fluidity will bring you more power than perceived control for that very reason. Fluidity, the ability to adapt, to be mobile, to change decisions based on changing circumstances. For example, I played the game World of Warcraft at the highest of levels, and then what made PvP, and you'll notice if you've ever played a video game before, or if you've ever played a sport, what makes player versus player so much fun is that it changes based on every single game is different. You know what I'm saying? Versus when you work in a 9 to 5, you're following the same mechanic, the same script, just as if you're playing campaign mode in a video game. It's the same thing over and over and over and over. When you go into a game and you walk to an NPC, a non-playing character, they say the same thing. Hello, traveler. Hello, it's the same thing over and over. But when you play against a new player, they could do this. They could cast this spell. They could do this ability. They could do this counter. And then you're forced to adapt to the circumstances. And then what makes you the best in that arena, in that realm of human endeavor, is the gift of anticipation, which comes from experience. As in positioning yourself to where you know what they're going to do before they do it, and so you're able to immediately counter that, and that's how you become the best at something. But that takes experience, and it takes fluidity. It takes you being Batman and having multiple tools within your, the Batman tool belt. Is anyone going to get that reference? I don't know. All right, to separate yourself as a strategist, the essence of strategy, true strategy, is to put yourself in situations where you have more options than the enemy does. And this was my commentary on that. Sending an off-healer, this is a nerd commentary, it's from the video game. Sending an off-healer / hybrid DPS, or someone with additional bubble block or trinket, etc. Or increase skills and tools as a fighter, etc. So to reiterate, what a true strategist is and how to really separate yourself as a strategist, as a general, a commander, as a leader, okay, is to put yourself in situations where you have more options than the enemy does. How do you get more options? You have more skills. How do you get more options? You have more resources. You have more money. You have more freedom of maneuverability. You can make more decisions based on resources. And if you're a fighter, if you're going to martial arts, those resources are more skills. I'm a white belt in jiu-jitsu and I go against a black belt, who do you think is going to win? Why? The black belt. Why? Because they can do more. They have more spells. They have more abilities. They're max level of the character. And so when I do this, they have 100 ways that they could submit me, versus I know 3. You know what I'm saying? That's what gives them the greatest options to be the best strategist. Is it doesn't matter what I do, because they have 1,000 counters and they have the gift or the skill of anticipation because of experience. As in, it becomes a game where they just bait you with traps because of the novicity, if that's a word. They want you to do this, to overextend, to make this blunder by giving you, like in chess, a perceived advantage, and then boom, you'll take that position that you think that, oh man, I got them, but that is what they wanted. For example, I was rolling with this blue belt. He had a few notches. He's been doing jiu-jitsu like 8 to 10 years, Fernando, and he pushed me a certain way, and then it made me push him back. And then he just did this thing where, whoa, and it flipped me over. And I was like, what the hell just happened? And then afterwards, I talked to him about it. I was like, what was that? And he was like, oh, that's like my favorite thing to do. And then I was like, well, what is it? And then how does it work? And then, I was asking all those questions. And he said, oh, I'm pushing you here because I want you to push me back. Because when you put your body weight over here, I have so much momentum to then easily, effortlessly, without me using any force or energy, I can flip you over. And he's literally just harnessing the momentum that I'm offering to him by the trap that he laid for me. So the point is, that is the demonstration of a true strategist. As a basic example, to separate yourself as a strategist is to put yourself in situations where you have more options than the enemy does. So how do you gain more options? Experience. The people who have in school districts who are at those high made-up titles, they've just been playing the game longer. You know what I'm saying? Versus the person who isn't there day one. But what I'm doing in real time is I'm expediting the learning curve by doing what Tony Robbins discusses as condensing decades into days. And how do you do that? You go to experts. When I was in Brazil and I was learning Muay Thai from Professor Giovan, who's been doing Muay Thai for 25 years. And I looked around and there's one other person in the class. And the class, when I distilled it down, it was like $75 for all of my martial arts training. And then when you divide it by the class, each class was like $1.50. For not only the lesson, but then he would stay for upwards beyond an hour afterwards asking any question that I could possibly have. And all I could think about was, how in the hell is no one taking advantage of this? Not taking advantage of the person, taking advantage of this opportunity, of this education. And it blew my mind. And the way that I'm able to condense decades into days is you take somebody who's walked the path and done the trial and error for 25 years. What works? What doesn't work? What should I focus on? This. And then you live out what Kobe Bryant discusses as when you're pursuing your goal, your mission, the world becomes your library. It literally opens up and you're given all the tools, all the resources, all the insights, everything that you need. You actually prove the quote from Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist, where he says, when a man is pursuing his personal legend, which is his mission, his purpose, his divine, alignment with his divine plan, his highest potential, the universe and God will conspire. The universe will conspire in helping him to achieve it. I am living proof of that. When I go into a new martial arts gym in a new country, I am gifted a guide. I'm gifted a teacher. I'm gifted a translator in places where they don't, the lesson isn't in English. I'm sweating like crazy. The card was full. I got stopped mid-speech. You're just gifted. It's a completely true quote. I'm literally gifted all of these guides and teachers and mentors, and the universe and my physical reality literally conspires in helping me to achieve this goal, which is this noble quest, this mission that we're on right now. So, to continue, we're almost done. Does that make sense? So I put separate yourself as a strategist. The strategy is true strategy is to put yourself in situations where you have more options than the enemy does. And yes, I don't know how I got on the topic of the universe conspiring from Paulo Coelho, but I know my transitions are perfect, and so you got what you needed to get out of that. Next, should you inherit a group? And this is actually really cool because I'm actually living this out in real time. It's from the book. Should you inherit a group, analyze its structure, and alter it to suit your purposes? And I put my experience here. So it's interesting because I've always had a skill of walking people home, which is basically embodying what it means to be a Christ-like mirror, giving off this energy vibration, planting a seed of belief of the potential of who someone has to become, and then later on they water it, they believe that seed, that idea, that possibility, that vision for themselves, and as soon book one of this university, As a Man Thinketh by James Allen, sorry for the noise outside, as soon as you believe, it is. As you think, so you are. So I would plant a seed of belief, but they wouldn't be there yet in order to receive it, so just stay as a seed up here. But as soon as it became truth and they believed it for themselves, that is when the seed would take root, and then they would water it, give it sunshine, and then boom, it becomes a new reality. Should you inherit a group, analyze the structure and alter it? So the group that I inherited upon coming here in Mexico is they run it every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's called a Circle of Fire. It's actually a really good idea because it's just a group of men who discuss their hardships, what they're dealing with, and I don't want to say it's like group therapy, but it's a space where men get to discuss all of the burdens and crosses that they're bearing with other men, in the only environment that they're able to do that in. And so it's interesting. And I've never been in a group like that before, where I'll discuss what I'm doing, what I'm, mentally combating, what I'm working through in my own process of unbecoming. From the quote from the same author, from The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho, it's so beautiful. Maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything, it's about unbecoming everything that isn't us. That's the journey of becoming Christ-like. That's the journey of getting back to who you were as a child. That's the journey of refinement. When you refine silver, you're getting off all of the embellishments, all of the impurities for you as a person, all of the trauma, wounds, projections, indoctrinations, the systems, the programming, everything that isn't you. Getting you back to who you were as a child before the world tried to harden you, project all this garbage on you, tell you who you need to be, put you in this box saying this is how you need to live your life. And most people, they'll go down that indoctrinated route, living a life of conformity. But should you inherit a group, analyze its structure, and then and alter it to suit your purposes. So I would analyze this group, and I was like, it's interesting because I live out my reality right now from the idea of Marcus Aurelius in the book Meditations, where he says, treat everything as a required assignment, perceive everything as a required assignment, no matter how trivial an event or a circumstance. It's all required for your highest nature's design, your greatest potential. And so I was even viewing that as this group, because I've done it one-on-one, where somebody will sit down with me and I'll literally walk with them for 4 hours to 6 hours while they're, working through their past wounds and trauma and hardships and, fears and, everything. And I'll just be that beautiful mirror, reflecting back to them. It's what Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning discusses as logotherapy, where you literally just repeat back to the person exactly what they're saying, and you act as a true non-biased, transparent, emotionally detached mirror, just complete truth, versus their reality, which is clouded with emotion and distortion, versus you're emotionally removed and detached from the situation, from the heartbreak that they're going through, from whatever, that you can see the solution and the problems and the limiting beliefs and the self-sabotage and the, poor internal dialogue. You can see everything so clearly from being on that other side. And from having experience with other people, with walking other people home, with, dealing with people who, everybody goes through the same problems. We all have the same fears. We all have the same insecurities. Well, it doesn't matter what your race, creed, religion, demographic, it doesn't matter. I've been, this is country number 36. I've had enough conversations around the world to understand that everything that is presented to us to divide us, to, make us harbor animosity or guilt or shame, it's all garbage to keep us in those low energies, low vibrations, when in reality is we're all just seeking the same human needs that Tony Robbins discusses. We're all seeking significance. We're all seeking certainty, a sense of security, uncertainty for a sense of variety and, spice for life, love, connection, growth, progress, which yields happiness, and contribution, which elicits 10 times the happiness from the oxytocin that you get filled up with. It's the same, everyone has those same basic human needs. But I would do that. So I would look at this group and say, well, how can I, fit how is this a required assignment for me? How is this in my physical reality a part of the divine orchestration for myself, for my unbecoming, for my journey home, for my, continued season of refinement, my walk with God? And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to talk about, any hurt, any hardship, any trauma, any abuse, any wounds of the past, any whatever. And also, I came across a book from a reel that I watched called The Hero of 1,000 Faces. It's the 17 kind of bullet points of the hero's journey. And it's fascinating because I'm on my hero's journey right now. And the stage that I'm at with here is kind of like a rest. I'm on the halfway point of this noble quest, this crusade. And there's a part in it, and it's atonement with the Father. Atonement with the Father. And it's like coming to terms with the highest authority figure within your life. And so I thought for myself it was God. But then in this circle of fire, these group discussions, every week a new person has to stand up and give a presentation, basically completely open up about their whole story and relationship with their Father. And so it's fascinating for me because I come from a very abusive childhood. I come from, coming home to my father having my oldest brother tied up to a doorknob with his hands and feet bound, saying I could step on his back and snap him in two. I'd come home and to see my mom with a blade against her neck. I'd come home and see my brother, bloodied. I'd come home and find out that my older father sexually molested, my older sister. We were driving from my grandparents' house on a visit, and then we were in the middle of nowhere in Oregon. My father turned to my mom and he was like, you can either get out of the car right now, this is in the middle of the woods, forest, with all of the kids, or we can go home and get a divorce. And then, I've known the abuse of having an abusive father. We were all beat as kids, and the older you were, the worse it was. So I wasn't physically beat, but I was hit with a stick or a belt in places that you could hide the bruises when you would go to school. So through long sleeve shirts or through pants. And then I was given more psychological punishments where you'd get put into a corner and have to raise your arms as long as you can, which it sounds easy. You know what I'm saying? But try to do that and your shoulders burn, and if you were to let them down, you would either get hit or there was just that insinuated fear of a worse punishment should you, not comply. Point is, and why I'm sharing all that is I contoured that group to say, how can I get the most out of my own healing, out of my own growth, out of my own, and then it's cool how it's in alignment with the hero's journey, my own atonement with my, Father. It's fascinating. It's fascinating. So you can apply the strategies of war, and it's actually the point that Robert Greene wrote this book, is you can apply this to your life, to your enlightenment, to your emotional, spiritual progression, to your journey home, right? Because at the end of the day, that's all we're trying to do. The reason that we're disseminating these books and I just like the idea of having a garden. That's why I created escapetheright.life.com. That's why I have the garden as, a membership only, just only people who are privy to my most private and intimate, garden, my inner world, my inner sanctum. of what I'm trying to build and create within my life, the safe place that I'm trying to cultivate where other people have the feeling of safety to let go. And it's through the honesty, vulnerability, raw transparency that inspires courage within others to speak their truth, to speak their traumas of the past, to be themselves. And I love that it's all in alignment. You know what I'm saying? And so that's why I love that we're doing this Rat Life University and that we're really disseminating these laws and these strategies one by one. It's not just for the education, it's not just for what we are able to learn and to glean and to discern from these books, but then how we're able to apply it both in real time within our jobs, within our business lives, within our relational lives, but also as a balm to heal past wounds. Do you know what I'm saying? By having a greater degree of cognizance of what happened, why I felt the way I did, and just being able to create that space where we can have that discussion, have the dialogue, and be able to talk it out, and be able to think it out, because I was on a drive going to the gym yesterday with Ricardo, and I said, I was like reflecting on the last time that I saw my father, and I was like, it was during custody visits where, he would show up for like an hour and you get to talk to him, and then there'd be like a mediator in the room. And then I was like, and then that was it. And then he said, well, how did it stop? And I was like, well, he stopped going. And then, so, that stopped. And I was like, I was 10. It's not like I had a decision or a say in the matter. But then I reflected on it. I said, how confusing is that to a 10-year-old child that your father just walks out of your life, And then that was, when I reflect back on all of my, past pain and trauma and hurt, that was the biggest wound of abandonment that I have ever experienced in my entire life. And then it's fascinating how, in reflection, that single action from a parental figure bleeds into so many other aspects of life. So into future relationships, into pushing people away and like pre-rejecting them, into a belief system that you're just going to leave me like everybody else or like my father did. It's incredible how, number one, the importance of a father, the importance of a mother, the importance of a marriage, but the importance of, or the significance of how a single action can create such a ripple effect, can have such an impact on another person's life, especially someone who it was not even their fault or responsibility. A 10-year-old child's, what hand did that 10-year-old child have to play in, their parents having this divorce and having this separation or having this abusive father figure or whatever. But then how powerful is it from pattern recognition to then learn and heal and discover, oh, that's why, this happened, or that's why I'm feeling this way, or that's why I have this habit, or that's where from my history, from my past, from my father, that's where I learned that the faulted belief system that love is something that's conditional, that's something that you have to perform for, that you have to earn, because that's all you know, that's all you knew, that's all you were taught, that's all you came to know. Versus the truth of the matter, which is love is something that you recognize. It's not something that you need to perform for or to earn within another. So I share all of that with you to prove that sentiment, that line, should you inherit a group, right? And so I offer for food for thought and consideration to view all of your circumstances, conditions as required assignments, as gifts given by God for you. So if you find yourself in this group, or with this, people of friends, or this person comes into your life, even if it's someone who you hate and have animosity towards, self-reflect and say, why was I gifted this person who I despise, who I hate, who I want to punch in the face, right? Complete garbage. I hate their character. And I have a very recent experience with this. And it's like, what change of behavior are they challenging me, or are they gifting me the opportunity to do? And for me, most recently, I met a person, a lot of animosity towards, and then it's like, oh, this is an opportunity to pray for an enemy. Whoa. And then the feeling afterwards was incredible. This is an opportunity to not shrink myself by someone threatening to dim my shine. Ooh, to not abandon myself. This is an opportunity to stop giving my energy to people who don't value and appreciate it. Ooh. And so then it's like, oh wow, so this person was actually sent to me for me as a gift. And then it's fascinating when you actually pass the test that God, that your angels will gift you in your life for your ascension, for your walk home, for your unbecoming, for your refinement. You know what I'm saying? It's all about perceiving life as happening for you. And you develop that belief system by going through your hero's journey, by going through God's forge. Do you know what I'm saying? And then you become the most godlike, Christ-like version of yourself at time's end by actually self-analyzing and reflecting and not being a victim. Not saying, oh, this person came to me, into my life to happen to me. It's like, no, they were gifted to me for a reason, for me. But it's about having that humility and willingness to search for that how and that why. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So you can do that. Should you inherit a group, analyze its structure and alter it to suit your purposes. Okay. Final quote. Victory will forge stronger bonds than superficial friendliness, and victory comes from discipline, training, and ruthlessly high standards. So I like to end that because the whole premise of this strategy was segment your forces, the controlled chaos strategy, break your forces into independent groups that can operate and make decisions on their own. The best way to, become victorious, to become your best self, is by surrounding yourself with killers, surrounding yourself with people who do not lack discipline. And I've found that to be paramount amongst people who are in martial arts gyms. People who actually have all of the virtues that you can only get by, showing up on that day. And so what do they demonstrate without even speaking a word to them? Courage, consistency, heart, patience, the ability to overcome fear, just courage, like heroism, work ethic, discipline, honor, character, integrity. And it's fascinating how I have never met better quality character or higher caliber character, men and women, than I have in the last few countries within martial arts gyms. These aren't the people who are going to cheat on their significant other. These aren't the people who are going to gossip and talk about garbage more often than not. These are the people who are actually, because they know how hard it is, because they know the brutal realities of being in the arena, because they know blood, sweat equity, tears, because they know years of being alone, years of silent work and effort, without, the visual, physical, whatever return. These are people who are actually they exalt and exacerbate honor and respect and accountability and ownership and personal agency and heart and leadership and willingness not only to lead themselves or their kids or their spouse, wife, family, their community at large. It's true tribal chieftains. Those are the people that you see in these higher levels or they're usually gym owners, or their higher degree of belts. One sec. I was finishing up and then my friend's mom, calls me, and what are you going to do? So I don't, where will we wrap it up? I had such a good monologue and speech going. They ruined it. No. That basically sums up the strategy. And so, I don't know. I have no idea where I left off, but I just want to finish it there. So that is the 6th strategy of war by Robert Greene. It's really cool because we're disseminating this as I had peppers. They're forcing me to eat right now. They're like, do you want eggs? Do you want pancakes? Do you want cheese? Do you want all this? And I was just like, pancakes sounds pretty sweet. And then they were like, do you want peppers? And so I just ate a bunch of peppers. I was like, I just want them cold. They were trying to put in the eggs. I was like, I don't want that. Just give me eggs with cheese. Complete aside. Anyway. It's all about the journey of unbecoming. That's the thing that we're all on right now. It's why I wanted to create the garden within escapethereallife.com, which if you haven't checked out that entire website, I highly recommend that you do. I love the garden that we're building. I love the safe place that we're building that's going to inspire other people to have the courage to pursue their truth, to pursue their path of authenticity, to go on their hero's journey, the narrow path, to walk themselves home. And what's really cool is that we all have the opportunity to be that mirror for them, for others. We all have the opportunity to be God, meaning to hold a lantern, to not run ahead of someone, to meet them where they are, and to show them the very next step, to illuminate on the path, the very next step that they can take towards their enlightenment, towards their own inner freedom, their spiritual freedom, their relational freedom, their financial freedom, what have you. And so I love that we're disseminating these books because it's from the iterations, from the reflection of these stratagems that we can then self-analyze and reflect how they apply to our lives, how they apply to our growth, our healing, our past pains, our current frustrations, how we can change the lens and perspective of the events and circumstance conditions that we're going through in our life and say and offer a new question, a new line of questioning. How is this happening for me? Where am I being guided? What am I to learn from this? What am I being challenged to try or to do differently this time? And it's from the pattern recognition and then the following change of behavior that elicits change in character, that elicits spiritual ascension, that elicits you ascending to the next version of yourself, the higher, the person who's closer, who's then completed another lap, whatever, however helps you visualize it, on their way home to themselves, to being our most authentic, taking off a layer and a layer and a layer of all these 1,000 masks that we've been wearing, and it's getting back to the person that we were before we even embarked on the journey, before we even went to that horrific job, before we even went through that heartbreak or that crisis, whatever. But by harboring that cognizance that everything that we're going through always happens for us, and then challenging ourselves with humility and security to say, well, how did it happen for me, regardless of how hard and traumatizing and how miserable and agonizing that refining season or that refining event was. We could say, wow, what opportunity has this given me of the version of myself that I can now forge by harboring what this is all about, which is the courage to pursue. You know what I'm saying? And what are we pursuing? We're pursuing freedom. That's it. That's the whole reason that we're doing any of this, is to be free, is to be put in a position where we have options. Everything that I talked about within this strategy. So with that is Tark House, escapetheroutlife.com. We're all going to make it. Which route life? It starts with belief and the courage to pursue. And that's it. I'll check with you guys in the next one. Bye.